Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. And one of your hosts, Joe Gambino, and I am here with our other co-host, Joe LaVacca, we'll call him AKA Christmas starting in November. I remember a perfect stride, Joe, like November 1st, the Christmas music starts playing. That's usually a little bit too early for me. So
that is
Christmas
correct.
Season is here in full effect. So how to bring it up. I'm more of a, Christmas starts right after Thanksgiving. That's appropriate for me.
Yeah, I told Avery today we're going to put up our Christmas tree. And I said, I can't wait to throw on my Elvis Presley Christmas vinyl. And that
She's like, who's that?
Typically is the signal for me that Christmas is officially here. I've been delaying it.
I see.
But
this is really late for you. I thought the tree would be up, the house be decorated.
Playing every other weekend game and traveling so much, it's always based on when me and Avery can kind of do it together now. So we were going to throw it up together like halfway, and then she didn't want to do it halfway, so we're going to do it all today and then make a whole big deal.
Very nice. Very nice. We'll have fun with that. And we do have a guest on the podcast today. We're here with Gino Lazzaro. He is the owner of Pain Physio. He works with athletes that have persistent pain. Welcome into the show.
Thank you so much for the invite, guys. As I said, first international stage for me. So
yeah, first
very cool.
International guest for us.
Sweet.
And Gino, where are you located?
In Germany, near Frankfurt. Many people know Frankfurt, so
yes.
That's about half an hour from here.
Do you partake in Oktoberfest festivities, and what are those like?
Probably one of the only Germans who doesn't partake in any of those things. I don't drink alcohol, so I'm really boring. Yeah, not really my jam.
Okay.
I hate the music and...
No, whoa, we're going deep now.
Yeah.
There was that commercial, though, I remember, that was promoting people to drink more water. I forget who made it, but it was everyone walking around with a beer stein, just cheersing water and dancing around. So you're not even there doing that, like just beer stein and some water.
Absolutely not. I try to stay as far away as possible from that.
Is that like a tourist trap that you guys try to avoid in Germany, or is that like
no, actually, most Germans like that stuff.
I see.
Or a lot of Germans like that stuff. It's just not my thing.
I was wondering if it was like sorry, Joe. I was wondering if it was like the ball drop in New York. Like I would never, ever go to the city to attend it.
Perfect example.
Because of how crowded it is. Like, sure, it might be cool to see once, but I would never sit in any of that. So I was wondering if it was a similar. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no. I was literally thinking the same thing. I was like, there are definitely these tourist traps that were all over New York City. And then the first one that came to mind, I was like, the ball drop. I'd never do that, ever. Wouldn't be caught dead. So we were definitely on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
But you're from Germany, right, Gino?
Yeah.
What part? Are you from Frankfurt?
No, from the Black Forest, actually.
What does that mean? Where is that located on the Germany map?
Southern. As far south as you can go, basically.
Okay. All right. Very good.
I like the name Black Forest. Sounds straight out of like a Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah, sounds mystical.
Well, it's no alcohol for you, but our first question for all of our guests is, how do you take your coffee? We have a very loose theme of coffee on this show, so we'll start there. Nice, easy question for you.
I did a barista course about 6 months ago or more, so we have a machine here, and that was literally one of the best purchases I've made in my entire life. So good. The problem is, though, and you might know that you can never drink coffee anywhere else anymore. It sucks. And it's super expensive, and it tastes not even half as good as at home, so that's difficult. But I have a cappuccino, always.
Perfect.
Yeah, Joe is very good at making the homebrew coffee. I have asked for the show has inspired me for Christmas to actually ask for a gift this year, and I actually asked for a new coffee machine.
That's good.
I need to step the game up. I need to get on the level of our guests, the level of Mr. Joe Gambino. Now, when you took this barista class, did you learn how to make some designs in your cappuccino with the milk? Are you doing like a leaf? Are you doing like a heart? What's going on with the designs?
Unfortunately, no. Is it called latte art in English as
Yes.
well? I'm not sure. None of that was happening there. It was really basic, to be honest. I'm pretty good with a heart, even a feathered heart by now, but that's about it where I am.
What would you say was the biggest takeaway or thing that you learned from the course?
From the coffee course,
Yeah, from the coffee course.
it was basically the discussions afterward where I spoke to the host. In the course itself, I didn't learn anything because I watched a gazillion videos on YouTube beforehand, and then I just asked him some stuff about the machine, how to set it up, etc., and then got some individual takeaways from my machine.
Very nice. I was hoping to get a little tidbit there for my own coffee making experience.
Sorry, man.
Hey,
I don't
you're
think
good.
my level is that high.
Don't worry, my level's not that high too. So right now now that it's warmer, I'll be dabbling to more cappuccinos, but I did iced lattes all summer. So
That's good.
yeah.
That's good.
I actually thought you stayed ice all year round, Joe.
Well, I have ice right here, so I do stay ice usually year round. But
that's what I thought. I remember
sometimes a
the
little
fun
warm
fact.
though is nice. I'll go a little warm.
Just changing it up.
Yeah.
Gino, I got another fun question for you. You mentioned that you didn't like German music, and maybe just in the whole like scheme of the Oktoberfest. So what's your favorite American song? If you're
Favorite
listening
American song? That's a good question. I definitely go for a track that Eminem has made.
Okay, wow.
I'd probably say When I'm Gone.
Love that. I love that. I was just hoping that you weren't going to pick something like John Denver or like Neil Diamond. I was like, no, don't do it, Gino. And I was setting you up for the trap too. I was setting you up for the trap, and you just totally surprised us with some Eminem. All right, cool. That's my favorite artist also. So much respect to that.
Thanks. Can't go wrong with Eminem.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't realize that. I guess I failed to realize sometimes that how global a lot of these artists are, and how the world has gotten so small with social media that, the minute or day I hear a song from an American artist is probably the same day you guys hear it now, for the most part, if you're following along with them. So that's pretty cool. So,
and Eminem is great preparation for a podcast as well for your voice. So I rap along 25 to Life by him like once before I hop on a podcast, and then my lips are all ready
to go. Wow, what a great idea. I love that.
Do that, man. It's good.
I know we all got the fancy mics too. I mean, Joe's even got like the booth recording mic over there, and I feel like you can even flip yours upside down, just look like you're in the booth.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. I love it. Well, that's really cool, Gino. I really appreciate that. Any other fun fact for the listeners that you want to share?
I was a DJ for many years, and I almost studied music production. So that's a little fun fact.
I love that. All right. What was the biggest show you ever put on as DJ Gino?
It was like 1,200 people, so not that big.
That sounds pretty big to me.
I'm trying to teach a course in New York City. I'm trying to get like 10 people to sign up. And DJ's spitting to 1,000 people, and he's like, it was just a it party, it wasn't all that big
house
of a
party,
deal.
just
one of those nights,
Oh man, that's really cool, Gino. I like learning fun facts about people, so that might have been one of the most fun ones.
Yeah, that's a
so
good
far.
one. That and Grayson being a cheerleader at some point have been the two ones that popped to me so far. Loving it.
Glad to hear that.
Well,
we should
let's
stop it right here because I don't think it's getting better than that.
I was about to say, right? Well, and then tune in next week for another episode of Beyond Pain Podcast.
We'll just cut it here and make a part 2 for next week and have some takeaways for people. Well, we'll dive in. Let's hop into it. Our typical first question outside of the coffee is everyone almost, I feel like especially people getting into physical therapy, people have their own pain journey that kind of shapes the way that they kind of go about things and maybe even push them into this industry. If you wouldn't mind talking about, your own pain experience and how that's maybe shaped how you treat your athletes, we can start in that direction.
Yeah. I had to think about this question for a while, to be honest, because I've been really, really lucky. I have thousands of hours of sports in my career, and I hardly ever got injured or had any pain. But then I recalled one injury on my wrist that I had when doing gymnastics. I was doing like handstands on rings, and then I fell down and I didn't let go of the rings because I was stupid. And so I had some, I don't know if it was a tendon or a ligament. I didn't get an MRI. And I treated it very, very, very poorly, even though I was in physio school at that point. It was the classical endurance coping that I did. Whenever my wrist got a little bit better, like not even no pain at all, just a little bit better, I would start doing handstands again and even one-arm handstands, working on those. And it always flared my wrist up like crazy. And then I thought, well, fuck that. Can I cuss here? Okay. I was just like, screw this, I'll keep going. And the pain just got worse. And then I was doing that until I had to take a break because the pain was just, I couldn't bear it anymore. So then I had to take like a month or two off, like completely, even strength training. And then I got back in and did way too much, way too soon. And it was the classical boom bust cycle, literally. So in the end, it took me 2.5 years to get rid of something that could have been like 6 to 9 months, maybe. And that really, really sucked. Yeah.
So you already had that injury into PT school, it sounded. So what made you take the path towards physical therapy? Was there something else in your life that was pushing you into this interest in the pain world or the rehab world, or you being such a kind of a sport guy, it seems like? Were there
very, very much
teammates that you watched kind of go through things, or what gave you that impetus to go to PT school?
Well, both my parents were professional athletes in squash, so I grew up in a very, very active family. I was doing like 6 sports at the same time in my childhood and even adulthood. So that was always a huge part of my daily life. And I was always really, really interested in the human body. So that was the main idea behind the physio education that I did. So not a pain story behind that. I was just super interested in the human body, and I didn't want to go to med school. So
yeah, that makes sense. I get that.
Nice
So
little
your
pivot
parents,
there, right?
your parents are athletes. You've been an athlete. So I guess that it makes sense that your special interest has been working with athletes, particularly athletes in a lot of persistent pain or chronic pain. I'm sure, though, as you've mentioned with your acute injury with gymnastics and growing up around your parents and sport teammates, what's the biggest difference, do you think, of working with an athlete and an injury and a mindset with acute pain versus working with an athlete injury mindset with something persistent?
a good question. I would say that pain is more of a side effect of an acute injury. So it's just a side effect, as I said. And when pain becomes persistent, it can become the problem itself. And then it branches into so many areas of life. So that is it's like a tumor. It goes everywhere, and people always spend a lot of time in the past and in the future. So they kind of lose touch to the present moment because they always think about, 3 years ago, I was still running marathons, and how am I supposed to do X, Y, and Z this weekend? I have to plan ahead if I can even do this one workout because I might have a flare up for 2 days. So I don't know if I can go to that birthday party of my friends, etc. So they're always in the past or in the future. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of ACT. So acceptance commitment therapy a lot, where you really want to bring the person to the present moment. That's a big thing. And I also believe that biopsychosocial care, or even like an activism or an active care, becomes increasingly important the longer the pain has persisted for. Because like a hamstring tear, you don't really have to be talking about how the family situation is, etc. If they have a support network around them, it'll just get better very quickly. But with these other things, it becomes very, very important. because they might have detrimental people around them that make this pain last. Yeah.
I like that. I'm a little curious. I mean, it's like going back to your pain story and then tying it back into what we're just talking about. You know, I feel like your journey of like, even in PT school, I think it's one for listeners, right? Like, you know, PT school, like, you know, I've been a trainer my whole life. I've had a similar story with my back and stuff like that. Like, it happens to us. We make the same mistakes as everybody else, right? So I think people need to give themselves grace when they have pain and they overpush it and flare-ups are normal and all that fun stuff. But with what you learned over that 2.5 years to kind of get over your wrist pain, how has that helped you or shifted how you approach your athletes with working through the chronic pain?
Mm-hmm.
Has
That's
that
a good
like
question.
Yeah, has that had any sort of like shaping to what you do now?
Definitely. I mean, for one, it really helps me build rapport with my patients because I can tell from my own experience how difficult it is not to be active when sport is such a big part of your life. And then I'm like, I get it. And I just want to save you 2.5 years that I missed out on by being too fast. So the wisest thing for you to do is take a step back right now, even if it is for a month or 2 months, which might seem long for you right now. And I totally get it because I was there before. If we zoom out a little bit, this is actually a very short time span because you want to be doing sports for the rest of your life. And if it takes you 2 months to recover properly, then I would suggest that you take that time and I can assist you with that, making it as easy as possible for you. So that is a big thing, building a great relationship, working relationship with my patients. And that is, as we know, one of the most important parts of our clinical encounter.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Gino. The thing you touched on too with the biopsychosocial model, and for patients listening, that's just the way of clinicians trying to identify main sources of problems or entry points for intervention. You mentioned a hamstring strain or tear, very biological, very tissue focused. You can look at that on an MRI. You can see, visible signs of damage. And yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Like you need the 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever, to recover. We gradually build you back up. But then you touched on something I think that was important in you are identifying something that would be detrimental to your athletes and maybe make you force outwards a little bit. What would an athlete, particularly, your patients and stuff, what should people be looking for as detrimental effects, maybe in other areas that you've seen and helped your clients work?
The first thing that comes to mind, which is of course recency bias, but the first thing that comes to mind is that if they have people around them that are too supportive, this can become a big problem because that can reinforce a belief in you that you are not capable at the moment. If everyone says, yeah, Joe, don't do that. I'll do that for you. Yeah, no, you can't do that. I will do that for you. Please just lie in bed. Don't move at all. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like strong and empowered, or do you feel like weak and fragile?
Yeah, delicate for sure.
That was like the one that came to my mind like immediately. But of course, other things are the work environment that you are in. Like if you're happy with your job or not, we know that this has a huge effect on, for example, low back pain. So job dissatisfaction is a risk factor of developing back pain. That's a big thing. Yeah, of course, nutrition is another factor. Sleep, a big one, like these recovery factors. Yeah, I like the CFT kind of style where this third thing is about how can you as a person be healthier? And that means like relationships, that could mean nutrition, that could mean sleep, whatever. What can you think of right now that would make you a healthier person? And what are some low-hanging fruits that you can work on? That's another very important distinction here. Because if you can change your work situation that easily and you're like, yeah, your work situation sucks and that's keeping up your pain, thanks for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's so overlooked with the things that people can control, and they zoom in and they just focus on this one thing, and then they lose sight of all this other stuff around them that can make them better or make them who they are. And that whole stuck in past and future, I think, really robs you of that identity. And one of the things I really try to push with people is, well, what's going to bring you back to feeling like you right now? Is it taking care of your kids? We were talking about kids before the show. Is it pouring yourself into your job? Is it doing something like a walk instead of a run? Like what can we do for that? So I really appreciate that. Two things that you also mentioned, and just more for like clarification stuff. You mentioned ACT therapy, which is acceptance and commitment. You mentioned CFT, which is cognitive functional therapy.
Sorry, I forget. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. No, so just for like, again, like patients listening or maybe clinicians who haven't heard of these things, would you mind just like doing a quick explanation on how or what ACT therapy or CFT therapy is and how you bring it into your treatments with your athletes?
Yes. So ACT is a behavioral therapy method, and the key component is that you have to you have to start with acceptance. If you cannot accept the situation you're in right now, there's no room for change. So psychological flexibility is the key part of ACT. Like there's this hexaflex of acceptance commitment therapy. So 6 different components that interact with each other, like being present in the moment and what your values are, and then committed action is the last step. So it really starts with first an understanding of the problem and then having the person accept the situation the way it is right now, then not overly identifying with the thoughts that the person has. And then there's this thing with a conceptual self, very in depth now, but we have these I am statements, like I am an athlete, I am a pain patient, whatever. We should really try to like split up this identification that a person has with something, because that is a very static thing, and the self is something that changes dynamically. And if you're stuck in this static mode of I am an athlete and you're not able to participate in your sports, that makes it very difficult for you to cope with the situation. So questions that I like to ask is, why do you like participating in sports? What is the value behind that? And maybe it is pushing boundaries. Maybe it is social interaction. Maybe it is proving something to yourself, because the only time in your life that you were praised by your parents was when you achieved something. Then that would lead us to a totally different path, really finding out why something is of importance for you right now. And that gives us a lot of opportunities to work with that. For example, if you just really like the complexity of a sport and you like pushing yourself, there are many different ways to do that in life. I mean, you could play chess. I love playing chess, by the way. That can really push yourself. And you can do that immediately, no problem at all. And that might fit with the same value that you find in participating in sports. That's the idea behind that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I'm kind of curious, you earlier you met, you were talking about if you had, you have people who are, very difficult situations when you're an athlete, like you identify as an athlete, you've done it your whole life, you get injured, and then you have a hard time navigating pain because it's holding you back from doing something. So how would you educate somebody based on everything we just talked about? If you have one of your athletes come in and they can't run again, or they can't play golf and they're really struggling to kind of get back to it, how do you kind of help them figure out what they can start to do now, and then as you're trying to work back to getting them to the activity they want to do?
Yeah. So I would basically frame that as the 5-step process that we also teach people in our coaching, and that I just published in my pain guide that people can just download for free, because those are the 5 steps that have been working really well for us. And it just gives the people a framework that they can work with, and that can really help, like some sort of trajectory or like a thread that really makes sense for them. So step 1 will be, what is your status quo? Where are you right now? That is the most important first step that we have to know about. And then the step that most athletes miss is finding a baseline level that they can tolerate. And I'm not excluding myself here. I have been there before, not talking from here to there. I have been there. How much stress is tolerable for you? And I say stress and not training or training volume, because that is one stressor, but it could be many other things that add stress to your life and that influence pain. So what is a stress level that you can easily tolerate without increasing your pain. Because if you have that, that is like a safe resort that you can always go back to when you have a flare-up. It's like a safety net, and that can really help people. That it never means, or hardly ever means, that you have to completely stop with everything that you're doing if you're aware of this one safety net that you can always go back to. So that's something that we try to find with our athletes immediately. And it's usually a lot lower, the stress level or the activity, if you want to say so, than what they're used to. And that's important. They're like, oh, Gino, can we do some more exercises? Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. Let's discover your baseline level first that you can always tolerate. And then step 3 would be progress, and not in a stupid way where you feel good that day and you just do like 50% more than the last session. Like incremental steps. There are some studies out there, and it's highly individual, of course, but like 10 to 20% increase in load maximum is where we go with. And then the 4th step is a very, very important one that most athletes miss, me included, is the stabilization phases. We as athletes like to do, because we're very ambitious, is last time I was deadlifting 140 like kilograms, and so next time I'll do 145, and then if that worked well, I'll definitely go for 150 the next time. So we just always try to progress every single session, and just breaking that mindset a bit, because when we're in pain therapy, the goal is not to increase your load tolerance in every single session. Like, it's not about maximum performance what we're doing right here. So always include stabilization phases where you just keep the stress level equal, like the stress level that you can manage. Meaning in our case, like the training load. Even if it worked well that week, let's stabilize that for another week. And that's extremely crucial for emotionally valuable activities. I really double down on that, because, like, for example, I have many athletes with lower limb problems, and they really want to get back into jogging. That is very meaningful for them. And so we start jogging, like with intervals, for example, like a 1-1 interval is something we start with. So 30 seconds of walking, then 30 seconds of jogging, and then walking again. And then for maybe even just like 10 minutes in the first session, if they haven't jogged in 2 years. And then they're like, Gino, this was amazing. How about we do more next time? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I know. We'll get there. I know. I would want to do the same thing, but it could be that you had an awesome week this week. No stress at work, maybe even no work at all because you were on holiday. How about we see and test if that works as well next week? If so, awesome. Then let's progress the next time. But let's stabilize this first. And then the 5th step would be reaching a goal or a milestone. That's a very, very big thing that we do with our athletes in the beginning, that we ask them, what are emotionally meaningful goals for you? And then we try to break those down into achievable milestones. If someone wants to run a marathon again and hasn't jogged in 2 years, that will take a long time. And that can become frustrating in time. So we say, how about a 1-1 interval of jogging and walking, as I just mentioned, for 10 minutes as a milestone? That is much more achievable. Like sooner. Yeah. Those would be the 5 steps of helping the person understand the trajectory of therapy and getting their compliance. And yeah. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that, because normally when you ask people questions, they don't have like a very systematic way of going about it. And I'm that way. I like to have like, this is the process that we go through. So I really love this. And I think there's a lot of overlap to everything that Joe and I talk about in this podcast. And I really love this last one, reaching the goal or milestone. And I think even on top of just ones that people, like, okay, this is what you want to get back to. Let's break it up into smaller pieces so that you can have these little wins that build up. I also think like what I also do is I give some people here are some movement goals that we're working on. Like, and if you're hitting these things, even if your pain is still there, it's a really good sign of progress that's coming. So this way they have something besides pain to look at, because pain is a very bad objective measure for us to look at. It's already frustrating for people. So if that's the only thing they're focusing on, it's not getting better, they're going to feel like, oh my God. So you give them a couple of movements like, okay, this stuff is actually getting better, even though my pain is still kind of there. And I think it also kind of adds to that as well. So I really love what you said here.
Yeah, that's a great
Gino,
point.
and I really appreciate the baseline and the stabilization. I think, those are so key that I think you mentioned a lot of athletes miss, but I think a lot of therapists who are trying
Joe,
to
I thought he
help.
was talking about me specifically.
Yeah, I was like, hey, shots fired, dang, but like even the therapists, who just want to run to treatment or run to progressions because they only have 6 weeks with someone or 8 weeks with someone. I think framing this as more of a long-term commitment. So your tissues probably aren't going to just magically be better for the most part in 4 to 6 weeks, especially when you missed, 70% of the things that you said we were going to do because of life and family and everything else. And even if your pain gets better, does that mean your tolerance, your baselines have improved at all, even marginally? And you shared that with your wrist. Hey, things are even a little bit better. Let me go practice my handstands again. And then I'm right back to square one, it seemed. So I think that's a really important take home message. And so many clients, will want to progress. And I had a guy this week reach out to me on our little, coaching program. And he's like, Joe, had a little flare up of back pain. What do I do? And I just said, well, let's just look at everything you have been doing. You've been in a really good period. You've been hitting all your workouts. But then I noticed that there were a couple of red ones are missed over the last couple of days. What's going on? Everything okay? I worked late. I didn't get good sleep. I've been kind of feeling a little bit off. So I just forced myself to go to the gym today. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you just take another day off if you needed to? You just said that it's been a tough week. There's been all these other extenuating circumstances. Remember, those are stresses too, as you pointed out. And he just, again, he's still in back pain, but it just gave him that calm of like, you know what? You're right. I probably pushed too much. This is my body just maybe protecting me or pulling me back. But these are such difficult conversations to have with athletes who always think or want to do, 10% every session rather than a week or in a month. And I'm just wondering if there has been a lot of pushback with that and how you've handled that in the clinic with your maybe more higher performance athletes. And I think you touched on it a little bit with the ACT stuff, but I was wondering if there's any other details that might be helpful for people.
You mean the stabilization phases and then convincing them that it's not the best idea of progressing every single session? Is that what you want me to
sort
get
of. Yeah. Or is there a way that with your programs, you mentioned, hey, 30 and 30 is a good starting point for a lot of people. I use a lot of those intervals too. And then you also sort of mentioned, with all the athletes that you have, I'm sure a lot of them is like, well, if I'm not sweating, if I'm not heart pumping, it's not a workout. Right. So how do you maybe bridge that gap of still giving people some good workouts, things to do while they're maybe not pushing through that stabilization phase too much?
Yeah, that is indeed a difficult task. I think what's most important here is that they always have to understand that what you're doing aligns with their goals. That's the most important thing. And communication is key here. So you can always ask the person, do you think what we're doing right now is working on your goals specifically, or is there anything unclear about what we're doing? Or you might even be thinking that something that we're doing does not fit with your or not align with your goals at all. If that's the case, then please let me know because we can change things immediately, or I can explain stuff better. It's never the person's fault. I always attribute that to myself, that my explanation was not clear or lacking stuff. That's a difficult thing for many therapists, and myself included, is keeping your ego out of the equation. That is a big part. And usually, because if you can explain to them why it is more useful in the long run doing those stabilization phases for them, and they understand that, then they're definitely willing to do that because they want to participate in their sport long term. And that's the way to do it. And the cool thing is, I mean, the people that come to us have been self-selected before. I don't have to do much convincing because we talk about, what did you do beforehand? And then he's like, yeah, I progressed every single session. And I'd be like, okay, where did that get you? Yeah, okay, get it. Might be a good idea to change something about that. So that's easier than when you're in a clinic and then you're just one of those physios that the person sees. It's more difficult in that situation, I understand.
Yeah. I wanted to shift gears a little bit because you have a podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it's an awesome resource. You've had really wonderful guests on there. So if people are listening and they haven't checked out your podcast, strongly recommend that. We'll drop a link for you in the notes when the episode comes out. But with all the people you've had on, particularly, or at least published recently, right? Because I know you maybe have talked to them throughout different periods. Going back, re-listening to your interviews, what was the biggest takeaway over the last 6 to 12 months that's helped you with your process, with your rehab? It could be maybe even personal or professional. What's that biggest takeaway?
I think it's something that was reinforced, that has been there before, and that I keep being reminded of, and that's humility. So it's fair to say that I had the opportunity, and I'm extremely grateful for that, to speak with some of the most well-known people in our industry. By the way, you guys are absolutely invited to the podcast, just to say that publicly.
We're in.
Because you guys are doing amazing work. What I've come to realize again and again is that the people that I have interviewed are extremely careful about what they say and what claims they make. And they usually add a shitload of nuance to their statement. And that's a sign for me that they are experts in what they do. That is something that has been underlined in the last 6 or 12 months a lot. And that has shaped my, sorry, Joe, shaped my content greatly. Whenever I'm like, oh yeah, I should do like a punchy headline, or like I have to change that statement a bit because then people will like it more and whatever. No, not doing that. Not doing that for the sake of growth, ever.
Yeah. No, I get you, man. That's I don't think people, like general public, and I don't even think a lot of practitioners understand that, like the things that we say to people, like how much they take that in, and they can take it either positively or negatively. And I have actually a client who I'm working with now. He's been having long-term issues. I worked with him at Perfect Stride, and we've been kind of going through this journey now. And he got an MRI on his back, and he was seeing a doctor for his hip, and they just saw like some contrasting, like the MRI actually had an MRI on his hip, and the doctor, as they were looking at it, just saw like some contrasting up in like the lower back, which wasn't even part of the imaging, like probably didn't even have a good look. And she was like, "You should go get this looked at. I think you might have cancer." And yeah, and the dude got like freaked out. Yeah, like how, like as a medical provider, can you say something like that to somebody and have no real merit? Like, I don't know, even like just like the way, like even if you were concerned, like I think the way that you go about having that conversation with someone has to be so different. Like you can't just like, oh, by the way, this looks like this might be, go get it looked at. Like that is, and that he like all of a sudden, like now he's super nervous. And now he's like trying to figure it out, and it's like, wow, like that's like almost a dangerous thing for a medical provider to say.
Yeah, that's messed up. How is it in the States? How long does it usually take? Like I'm imagining this person leaving with this thought that he or she right might have cancer. How long does it take for him to get that checked?
Yeah, well, he didn't have a back doctor, so I had to help him find one. And then I feel like maybe it almost took him like a month or something like that to get.
That's messed up,
to get it. Yeah.
That would have been the most terrible month of my life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
is that similar in Germany? Yeah. Would they be immediately referred, like across the street, next door, or is that similar constraints?
If it's very severe, you can always just go to the hospital and then get it checked immediately. I don't know if that's the case in the States, but you can definitely do that. If it's not as severe or sinister, you need to go the normal way, and then it might take like 3 months for you to get an appointment with a like a doctor if you're not privately insured.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, let's get off the bad topics here. I do have
Let's all cry
crazy
now.
things. Crazy things I hear doctors say.
Nice downer, Joe. Nice
yeah,
downer.
yeah.
We had DJ Gino leading it off, and now it's like,
Yeah, you got uppers and downers, right? We got to
Yeah,
take you
it's a
through
roller
the
coaster,
emotional
you know?
roller coaster. Yeah. But I actually curious here because I have like one specific story in my mind that I actually way before PT school. Like I don't know, like general public. I feel like sometimes when we say, like stress and stuff like that can cause pain, like people almost like think it's like, well, you're telling me like I'm making it up or it's in my head or something like that. When I was first learning about pain science and stuff like that, and as I was going through that process, I had one client when I was a trainer years before that all of a sudden, and I didn't really understand it then, but it made like a whole lot of sense to me. And like what I think really like made me more interested in pain. Like I was like, wow, I really saw this pattern of when this person was stressed, movement patterns got worse and pain increased. And it was like it was predictable. Do you have a story like that, like currently or in the past, that like you've seen with somebody that like really highlights, okay, like I really see when someone's more stressed out or something happens in their personal life that it bleeds over to flare-ups and pain and poor movement with your athletes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just recency bias again, but people are very sick at the moment here because it's getting colder outside. And we know how big the influence of the immune system is on the sensitivity of the body, like in general. And then people have more pain and they're like, why do I have more pain? And I'm like, you have an infection right now, right? Yes. And what does that have to do with my pain? A lot. And then I go on explaining some stuff. Yeah. So that would be a recent example, but other times as well, I have many. Our coaching is quite, quote unquote, expensive for many people because it's very intensive, like one-on-one work that we do with them. And so we have lots of entrepreneurs as well. And so they're many times they are in very stressful environments, like when they reach a deadline or something. They have loads of responsibility, and then usually their pain gets worse. They sleep less, and they're in a lot of stress and pressure.
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think one of the things I've shared with a few clients recently is that I think the complexity of pain is also its gift, because it doesn't allow us to look at it in one lens, that it's, just this tissue, it's just inflammation, it's just a tendon, it's just a muscle. And in many of the conversations I've had with people about illnesses or stress, they never made that connection before. And then to go back to the whole nocebo response of like, oh, you have cancer. Well, it's a lot more empowering for a person to look at their life, maybe like the client I was speaking about before, and saying, yeah, I have been run down this week. I've had a lot of stress this week. Work's been busy. I've been working later, haven't been sleeping as long. I traveled. That's a way better thing to cope with than I think your disc went out again. I herniated another level. I tore something worse. Because I think when those nocebo responses take hold of people, I think that's what people feel like they lose progress in. I've been building and building. I've been working with Gino. I've been working with Joe. I've been doing my mobility. I've been doing my intervals. And now I have pain again. So it just must be this tissue. And now I must need to go get injected surgery, or maybe I have to give up running altogether, rather than saying, you know what? I have so many other strategies, whether it's breath work, meditation, working on sleep, working on relationships, like you said. And maybe those don't take the pain down to a zero. And I don't think in many cases they actually do. But to alleviate suffering and avoid that big behavior change of maybe resistance or avoidance, I think that's really where we look at pain complexity as something that's bad. But I really think that it's truly a gift for clinicians and patients alike.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
So, all right. Joe, do you have any other questions before I let Gino go with our final one here?
I do not know.
All right, Gino, you're now international, right?
Let's go.
This is official, right?
Big stage.
So if you could reach everyone in the world, which this podcast surely will take you, it's going to take you global, brother.
Yeah, man.
Right? What would be, the one piece of advice you have for athletes in chronic pain that you hope they take from your message or this podcast or just, the work that you do with them?
I would actually put athletes in brackets here because what I'm about to say would apply to everyone. Persistent pain. And a big shout out to Ben here, my buddy Ben Cormack. He's doing amazing work as well. Go check him out. Core Kinetic if you haven't. This is not sponsored, of course. Is try making your life bigger instead of making your pain smaller. That is a big part. How can you focus more on doing the things that you love and the process of that and not the outcome and the pain? And we're living in, at least here in Germany, that's the case, in a time and place where people are constantly reminded of their pain. Like after every exercise or every time they see the patient, how's your pain now? Yeah, how's your pain now? How do you feel now? And we know that focus increases neural activity. And if you always focus on your pain, this will reinforce pain. So try to focus more on the things that you want to achieve, the small steps that take you there. And this can and will, in many cases, even reduce the pain. But this can be very frustrating if your main goal with persistent pain is to get out of pain, because there are conditions where you will not get out of pain. And if that's your only goal, then your life will suck a lot. And there are perfect examples. For example, Dr. Bronnie Thompson, who I've interviewed as well, she lives with persistent pain and she does well. It's the coping that's really crucial. How you manage the pain. Pain self-efficacy is the key word here. So that would be it. So make your life bigger instead of focusing on making your pain smaller. Amen.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I draw those bubbles for people quite frequently, and that's also a very eye-opening experience for them. All right. Joe, any other closing remarks or thoughts?
I don't think so, man. Take us home.
All right. Gino, we have absolutely loved having you here on the podcast. We will most assuredly invite you back. We look forward to hopefully being on yours as well in the future.
Absolutely.
Joe, love you. Gino, love you. Listeners, we love you. And please, balloons for Joe Gambino today. All right.
And fireworks,
please...
wait.
Oh, wait. Oh.
No, not coming. Usually that does fireworks.
Yeah, I know. I shut off my things because I kept doing thumbs up and they were popped up and all this other stuff. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you. And please come back next week for another episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.
Peace.